Hey, welcome to class, everybody. Today's essential questions are, number one, is cheating normal now? Two, what is going to happen now that Darth Vader is dead? And three, should I be scared about the future? Let's introduce today's teachers. My name is Mr. Linton, and I once thought it was a good idea to skateboard behind a pickup truck. And I have the scars to prove it.
I'm Mr. Walter, and I once almost got in a physical altercation because a friend of mine told me that leprechauns didn't exist.
And I'm Mr. Abbers. I once thought that it's the exhaust of the cars, like the exhaust pipe, the exhaust coming out of it, that thrust is what propelled the cars forward.
And despite all of that, we are still the smartest guys in the classroom. Welcome to our podcast and our lesson for today. On this episode of The Smartest Guys in the Classroom, we're going to be wrestling with the ever-popular topic, AI. And no, we don't mean the old movie starring, was Haley Joel Osment in that?
Bruce Willis?
It was supposed to be directed by Stanley Kubrick, but Kubrick died before he could finish it, so he passed it off to his good friend Spielberg, I believe, who did it instead.
My good friend, too. Anyway, to start our lesson off for today, I wanted to give Mr. Roberts here a chance to kind of explain what we mean by AI, because I find there's a lot of confusion about that.
Sure. So it's been, actually, quick backstory. Subliminally, I picked up a book over the weekend because I went to the library, and I like to read. And
Don't we all?
Yeah, we do all like to read. And this book I picked up, I think subconsciously because I wanted to be extra smart for this first episode. It's called The Singularity is Nearer When We Merge with AI by Ray Kurzweil. Do you guys remember hearing about the singularity back in the early 2000s? About how there's going to be this inflection point of continued progress with computer chips and processing power. That's this guy.
What's that law where
Moore's Law?
Moore's Law, where the transistors double every so many years?
Yeah.
Is that it? Okay.
Yeah. His type of future would like to see us build the brain on the computer, simulate it, and then merge our consciousness onto it so that we could live forever. Anyway, that's this guy. But he... yeah.
No, thank you.
So he talks about the idea of AI goes back to like the 50s and 60s when they are thinking of different ways to get computers to act like humans and pass the Turing test. Of course, named after Alan Turing from... Turing, thank you.
Yeah, you had it right the first time, actually. He pronounces it correctly. He's like, no, I would like to say it wrong.
And he's from World War II and cracking the German Enigma. Anyway.
Poland cracked it first. Anyway.
Two basic ways of going about trying to program a computer to think like a human. You can do top-down or bottom-up. The top-down approach is try to program all the common sense of humanity into a computer. The other way is to, like the bottom-up approach, where you try to build the infrastructure of a brain in a computer program using a neural net of sorts with different layers of interconnected nodes and training that just like a toddler trains and learns about the world around itself. And you give that neural net feedback on how it's doing, and it can learn quite a bit faster than normal humans would. But that's how we have large language models today, is through this neural net training. He does point out, and many people will say, doing it this way kind of creates a black box effect where we know that it works because we can see its output, makes sense, but we don't actually know exactly how it's coming up with the answers that it's coming up with.
Now, you mentioned there kind of this concept of large language model versus AI. There is a slight distinction there, right? Do you want to kind of explain?
I would think that large language models are a subset of AI where they are natural language programs. They work almost exclusively with language and any language of the world. And that can include coding, which has been a kind of a big use of large language models, allowing just novice people to make sometimes usable code, sometimes really bad code. But if you do I've seen people using paid versions of ChatGPT come up with very novel code. I've seen some people who they're doing their PhD dissertation, and like a huge chunk of that was coming up with code to interpret data. And then they see some of the newer large language models come up with it on the spot in mere seconds, and they're just blown away that, oh, what I just spent a good chunk of my life on can now be done on a computer for very little money over a very short period of time.
Well, and I think that's probably a good transition to my first kind of subtopic as we explore this concept of AI and how it affects our lives. Is we are teachers. This is a podcast based on the concept that we are all teachers. And so maybe a good place to start is, how is this affecting education?
It's just like Googling, but better, isn't it?
Better with an asterisk.
Yeah, thank you.
It's faster.
Yeah.
You'll get an answer.
And that answer will be very readable and understandable.
Yeah, I guess it depends how you're using it to cheat, right? Like if you're looking up answers on a homework where you have questions and you just need to write a response. What happened to Romeo in this act of the play? Then it'll spit you out an answer like that. If you're using it for full papers or something like that, then that's an entirely different ballgame, right? Because now you're dealing with structure and, well, its structure will probably be better than yours. Its words will probably be better than yours.
He's saying this as
be true.
He's saying this from the perspective of a high school student, not himself.
I don't know. As someone who writes, I feel like in some instances, I bet AI could write better than me. AI probably could write an academic paper better than me. I don't think it could write fiction better than me, but I think it could write academically better.
And that is a big problem. The academic journals are just being inundated with abstracts and chunks of writing done by large language models nowadays, to the point where they were even leaving in the little tagline at the end, like this is generated by ChatGPT or Bing Copilot or
I had
Gemini.
a student do that on an assignment. They left the tagline on. But yeah, I wonder if there's going to be a shift, especially with academic papers, of saying it is okay for the abstract to be generated, so long as the rest of the paper is actually written by the people who did the work. But the abstract is just saying, hey, here's what you can expect in the paper. So is there anything inherently wrong with having someone or something else write that? That's something you could argue.
And I think that's an interesting distinction that you're making there, right? Because part of when I think about education and I think about assessments and whatever else, my thought is if I'm giving something for students something to do, I'm trying to assess a specific skill usually, and if AI doesn't replace that skill, but maybe helps them in the ground levels of building that skill, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I mean, I've told students I use AI to help me draft letters of recommendation for them, because I could spend an hour trying to wordsmith the snot out of some letter that the admissions department isn't even going to read because it's largely a formality that they did the thing. Or I could put in a couple qualifiers about here's what the student looks like, here's their strengths, here's their weaknesses, here's whatever, spit something out, and then I can tweak it to make sure that it actually fits what they're doing. And I think that fulfills the letter of intent more so than, or at least the spirit of the intent more so than the letter. But I know not everyone likes that I say that.
Yeah. So long as it's actually writing what you think about them, which
Yes.
is why you use it to draft,
Yes.
not the final version.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I heard this, so we're talking about cheating in this concept. I heard somebody made this comparison, and that was that language teachers, English, social studies, those who largely deal with language, are experiencing right now with the addition of AI what math teachers did with the prominence of the calculator a decade ago. Because at first, math teachers, freaked out. I remember in high school some classes where the teacher refused to let us have a calculator sometimes because you need to be able to do this without a calculator. But now we look back at that and we kind of laugh, like, why would we need to do any? Because we have a calculator in our pockets at all time. Do you think that's a fair comparison?
I think we should have slide rules in our pocket at all times. So
Mr. Walter likes the idea of going back to all analog.
I love the idea of going back to all
You have
analog.
this fantasy you kind of put into your writing of just going back to all analog.
Well,
The man built himself a typewriter desk.
I did. But I mean, there's certain beautiful things about analog that you just don't get with digital anymore. The ability to repair, for instance. When a car has problems now, you need a programmer to fix it, which can be a problem. But we're off topic again. What was the question?
Well, I was asking, is it
do you
a
think
fair
it's a fair comparison? I don't think we're going to be using AI in the English class in the same way that we're using calculators in the math class. I don't think.
Well, I mean,
don't
the way
think-
that it changes teaching is what I'm getting at.
It's going to change teaching, but like the calculator changed, or the math classes changed because the calculator became integrated. I don't think AI is going to be able to be integrated in the same way.
I would like to see teachers change to recognize that it could be used as a tool for drafting and as part of the writing process. But that's just me and my rose-tinted glasses. I think that's going to be a long time coming. It'd be interesting to see what does happen in the near to long-term future.
I think it would be interesting, but how to put this? Part of the thing that we're teaching them is how to go about the writing process, not just can you produce the end product. And I think taking away a lot of those steps could potentially take away some life skills of I need to do these things. What order? How do I break it down? How do I handle a large-scale project when my boss needs me to do a large-scale project in the workforce? Drafting, going over your writing and being critical of your writing instead of saying the AI spat out a paragraph and I'm just going to change 2 words to make it sound my reading level.
But I think, so we go back to this concept of using it to draft. Isn't there more of an emphasis on teaching them how to go over their writing if we're viewing this as a tool, as a starting point? Now you have to be able to critically read and analyze and improve.
And you're assuming the students are going to do that?
Well, they're not going to. They're not
You
going.
can emphasize it all you want.
They're not going to do anything that we don't grade.
Correct.
So they're motivated by grades. So what I'm getting at here is, does this change the types of assessments that we give and the types of grades that we give in these classes? Can you, as an English teacher, keep the status quo that you have been? I mean, I know some teachers have just said, well, my answer is I'm going to have kids just handwrite everything because they can't use AI if I'm making them handwrite it. But is that really preparing them for the world that they're going to be living in?
But they could use AI and then just write what the AI.
Not if I'm giving them time writing in class.
Good luck.
I don't know if I have much else to add. I mean, you've got the idea of scaffolding. We provide training wheels here in school for hopefully for life skills, for things that they're going to need in life. And most people have to take thoughts from their mind and put them in another format that needs to be communicated to other people. That's a pretty universal life skill that's going to not go away anytime soon. I think we will be seeing AI as a co-intelligence. I'm borrowing this from someone on X or Twitter, and I forget his name off the top of my head, but he's written a book on using AI, and I think he called it co-intelligence, or co-intelligence is in the book. Just as the calculator is an extension, a tool, using AI as a tool, as an extension of our thought process, I think that's where we're going to be headed. And as teachers, we need to recognize that that is probably going to be the eventuality. And changing our assessments, changing our methodologies so to fit that new architecture.
Yeah. For the record, I'm not proposing what that new architecture should look like, or I'm a history teacher, not an English teacher, although I think there's certainly some overlap. But I think it's got to change it. What does that look like? We're in the middle of experiencing those growing pains right now, and I don't think we can stick our fingers in our ears and go, la 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 la, so that I pretend like it's not happening.
Absolutely not. Yeah, and the problem is that the architecture is just, we don't know what it looks like, right? Like the architecture for the math class changed, and they didn't know what the endpoint was, so you couldn't really plan for what you were going to be doing, right? You just had to go with the flow. So there's going to be a portion here where we just have to go with the flow and try and mitigate the bad parts and give them useful ways to use it to supplement the good parts.
Are either of you afraid that some person's going to come along and think that AI can replace teachers and we're going to lose our jobs?
I'm not too fearful of that. I did just see something that Gen Z, a good portion of them, see face-to-face, in-person relationships as important over digital relationships. I think after the pandemic, we kind of reappreciated face-to-face and in-person relationships. There are people that will prefer an education online, or it seems like someone was talking to me too about homeschooling. Is homeschooling on the rise? Does anyone know?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Going away from traditional classroom, that the classroom will always be there. I don't think the teacher's job will be in danger anytime soon. But yeah, it will be interesting to see if more and more students go away from the traditional classroom for alternative ways of education.
You mentioned a stat there. Was that Gen Z or Gen Alpha?
Gen Z.
Gen Z. So that's my generation. Hi everyone, I'm Gen Z. It's bussin' over here. I think more of that. I'm sorry. I think more of that has to do. I'm not sure as much of that has to do with the pandemic. I think the pandemic would have a greater impact on Gen Alpha because they're in their formative years still. Whereas Gen Z, I think it was just a byproduct of things being on the rise like Snapchat and texting, and everyone has a cell phone now. And they realized that, hey, texting my girlfriend, boyfriend is entirely different than having to talk to them face to face. And there's different standards and repercussions that come with each of those types of
Social
communication.
protocols.
Yes, they completely change.
Yeah. Well, I think going back to what you were saying there, Derek, that there's like a teacher shortage right now as well.
Yeah.
The climate of schools is becoming more challenging. The demands on teachers are getting higher. The antagonism of parents. So is there a world where AI is used as a way to offset that need? So now it becomes, well, we don't have enough teachers, so how can we use this technology to make teachers less necessary, not unnecessary, but maybe less necessary.
So you're proposing a future in which it's online school run by an AI.
No, I
I don't think it could be in person run by an AI unless you have like Chappie in the front of the classroom.
no, I'm not saying that it'll go that far. I mean, that would take,
Right, but we're postulating a future in which this
it would take generations, I would imagine, because people are always predisposed towards their own personal experience, and since everyone whose parents now were in a classroom, they're going to want that same experience for their children, unless they had such a traumatic experience in school that they don't. But
Or
it might shrink.
I don't think they even need a traumatic experience. They just need to say, well, that was a waste of time.
Yeah.
And we've got plenty of students right now who look at high school and say, well, that's a waste of time. So I'm not sure that's as far out as you think it is.
I just love to see AI do all my grading for me, so I could spend less time grading. And there are some versions of that out there, but so much of what we do, teaching science or computer apps, well, I guess, I don't know, can you, maybe some of your computer app stuff
Computer
could be?
apps could definitely be taught by an AI.
I was thinking just like correcting, not teaching.
Correcting? Probably.
Because do you have most stuff graded off a rubric?
Technically.
Would more students challenge their grades then, or would fewer?
The AI gave me this grade, but I disagree with it. But it graded it perfectly according to the rubric I gave it. That'd be an interesting argument.
Yeah. I mean, grading is probably your best application from the teacher point of view, because then it is totally, quote unquote, objective.
Well, well, there's a lot of opportunities for AI to do busy work for teachers, like whether it be generating quizzes based on vocabulary terms, or just there's things like that are pretty mindless, but we have to do. But whatever.
I've generated some questions for my physics class.
I've used it for brainstorming.
Yeah.
And, other things. Yeah. So that kind of I'm going to shift gears now. We've talked about the teaching pit, but the other part that I'm really interested in is AI generated art or AI generated images. Okay. Mr. Walter over here teaches some art. He has some thoughts.
You're throwing to me.
I guess. Look, you had
So that's probably the biggest impact right now. My chair's squeaking all over the place, so let me restart that. That's probably the biggest impact right now societally in terms of AI and what are happening with jobs and everything. Graphic designers are having a tough time. There are people, especially I've seen tweets or things on X where they...
this is an entirely audio medium, and the physical gestures that you're making don't show up, right?
You haven't added a camera yet.
In any case, where people who design websites or anything like that, they've lost their jobs because they're like, we'll just use AI to generate a layout. It's good at that. There are people who are selling paintings that were generated by AI because, quote unquote, if you think it looks nice, why does it matter if a person made it or not? And then this branches out into music, where we're having music generated by AI now, since vocal reproductions are becoming so accurate. But there is a look to AI art, which is like, what's that artist who is it Redlin? Terry Redlin, where all of his it's the grandma's puzzle hung up on the wall. Painter, you know who I'm talking about.
Well, I don't know the name of the author, but I know or artist, but I know what you're talking about.
Everything is fuzzy and happy, and it looks exactly the same. You've seen one, you've seen them all. The composition is meh. The lighting is broken, and there's a weird fuzzy texture on everything. That's essentially AI art. And it upsets me a little bit.
Well, see, okay, I'm gonna.
But there are good uses for it, just like the writing portion.
So I was doing some Googling today, as one does.
As you do.
And I was looking into articles on AI, and I found Bowling Green State University just did a study where they had people look at AI-generated art and human-generated art, and it measured a couple things. First of all, whether people were able to successfully differentiate between AI-generated art and then or human-generated art, but then also B, how they felt about the art. And what was interesting about it is reading the study, people were not able to tell the difference between AI generated art and human generated art. It was a coin flip, literally. They were like 50% accurate on whether it was one or the other. And even then, when they said like that's human generated, when asked how confident they were, it was not very confident. So they couldn't. But what only reason I'm talking about this is one of their interesting takeaways is then they asked them questions about how the art made them feel in things, and they found that whether people knew it was AI art or not, they were more likely to score the human-made art higher in self-reflection, attraction, nostalgia, and amusement, implying that they felt a emotional connection more to the human art without realizing that they were experiencing that. The study authors noted that they're trying to figure out like why is this? Because even if they felt that way, their brain didn't trust that feeling, and they hypothesized that maybe it's because the subconscious gets kind of, they called it the uncanny valley effect. They looked at the AI art and it just felt wrong, but their brain was trying to analyze it and couldn't.
And I think that comes down to composition mainly, where especially with dynamics and here's a brief overview for you. In art pieces, there are very strong lines that you like to follow, the third lines, the center lines, the diagonals, and you have if you have a right angle on the diagonals, you can get things like Fibonacci and all of that. In addition to that, you have, typically you divide an art piece into 3 sections, which is generally, one is dominated by light tones, one is dominated by midtones, one is dominated by dark tones. And AI art, it's looking at all of this sample data and it's putting all of this stuff together so that it looks like it was made as an art piece would be made, but it doesn't have the understanding to put it on the proper dynamics or to give it, even if they do proper lighting, it doesn't necessarily have your thirds or anything like that, which help with contrast and emphasis and the message of the painting.
Is that something that it's going to get better at?
Can it? I think
if you give it enough data, it will learn.
It'll learn. It'll learn what to make. Does it learn where to put it? Right? Does it learn to like the painting by, is it Degas with the dancers, where the ballerina has her leg up in the air and the angle that her leg is making perfectly lines up with the third line. Things like that, which bring the whole piece together in unison. I'm not sure you can teach that to AI, because that's not just you need to add this to the image. You need to add this in a place where it is significant. And I think that's probably what's lacking.
I'm curious if the people behind these models will try to address that. If you can give it explicit instructions that deal with those elements of composition to improve the output. This is just a guess. I have not read anything about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's like how everyone poked fun at AI for being unable to do hands, and then within a month, Midjourney said, "Hold my AI can of whatever, and we'll do that for you. And their hands are gorgeous now. So
they figure it out, and I think if you add that human element, right? So a lot of these AI art generating programs, you can, as a user, provide input to modify the existing image. And so even if you aren't drawing the thing yourself, if you understand the concepts of all those things, then you can tweak it. Yeah, that's right. I just yada 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 over all the stuff that Ben just said. You could do that. Like I don't remember how long ago this was, where a guy entered AI generated art into an art competition and won.
yeah.
Did he disclose that it was AI art?
Afterwards.
Ah.
Yeah.
Because again, he tweaked it, and it was like iteration upon iteration. It wasn't just a sentence print. It was, okay, now do this, and then put it. So
There are competitions where people have made AI-generated images of people and then make Instagram or other social media accounts around those generated images, and they have they have beauty competitions. Have you heard about this?
no,
have
this
not.
is fascinating.
This is only on a radio segment like several months ago, so I'm sparse on the details, but I distinctly remember a beauty contest between AI-generated images of people. And it's incredible that, you imagine that like, oh yeah, they're just going to be very attractive, that most people would find them attractive, that it still conforms to the general consensus of what beauty is at this point. They haven't really diverged much from that. And then many people had followed these accounts thinking that they are real people.
That's weird. I just found, I guess, kind of similar. I get suggested the most random music on Spotify. Spotify has no idea what my taste in music
Because
is.
you listen to so much weird stuff.
Well, yeah. But also, I have Song Request Fridays in my classroom, which confuse it even more because my students request the most random
So
stuff.
your eclectic mixed with
Yes.
what the high schoolers are currently requesting.
My electronic Finnish music meets their Gracie Abrams, and Spotify gets confused. But it advertised this one artist to me, and I don't remember their name. But I listened to a couple of their songs, and I was like, "This is garbage." But also, something seems weird. And I looked at the profile photo, and it was an AI-generated person. And it had an Instagram linked. And I went to the Instagram, and all of the photos were of the same person, but AI generated. So I think it was AI generated music with an AI generated person as the quote unquote face behind it.
How many monthly listeners did this AI generated account have?
It was ludicrous. It was over 10,000.
Somebody's just sitting there making
People are
money.
listening to this. Which is
We're doomed.
we're doomed.
And
We're
that
doomed.
is how
And
our
that's-
podcast ends.
That's the conclusion.
Okay, no, let's get out of this doom gloom cycle
Like-
for a second, because I do think there are some positive developments in AI generated art, and they're in that field. For instance, how about this? Darth Vader died.
Rest in power.
Yes.
James Earl Jones.
Yeah. Everybody knows it's James Earl Jones. Okay, or not.
Some
but-
some know him as Mufasa.
Yeah. Okay. Or Mufasa. So he died, but
I
he
find your lack of faith disturbing.
in the midst of his imminent death, he worked with Disney to record his voice saying all kinds of different stuff, and they put it into AI software. So now Darth Vader will live on, even though James Earl Jones has died. Now, of course, he willingly signed a contract giving them the power to do this, but I think that's pretty nifty.
I think that's something that only works in the medium of, well, television or shows or animation, where specifically in the case where it's only the voice that matters, because people's faces, we still struggle with rendering those. And I mean, in a couple decades, that won't be a problem. But I don't feel like that applies across disciplines to something like books, for instance, where if an author signs himself over because he didn't finish the series, can you imagine if Song of Ice and Fire, what's his name? He's never going to finish the books.
He's never going to finish the books.
Right. If he signed...
George R.R. Martin.
Yes, George R.R. Martin. If he signed over the ability for the company that published his books to generate books from his writing in order to finish the series, I don't think that works the same way.
I don't think it does.
I don't think it does. So, like, I feel like that's purely a television or movie medium. And, I mean, we're seeing that more and more, not just audio-wise, but visually. Like the recent Alien Romulus. Did you hear about this? Or did you see it? I presume you didn't see it.
No.
Ian Holm makes an appearance.
Who's that?
He played Bilbo. He's been dead for a while. But his family said that they thought that Hollywood had kind of nixed him towards the end of his life, and they were upset by that, so they signed over the ability for them to put him back in the movie because they thought that if he was still alive, he would have liked to be in it. And there's some weird uncanny valley watching CGI Ian Holm talk. But, like, that's a thing that we're doing now. And
I think you're right about the uncanny valley piece, because in other instances where I've seen, and most of the time it's not a dead person, but they try to put a younger version of them into the movie.
The de-aging software that they use?
Yeah, and it just looks messed up.
the only good time I've seen it work is in Blade Runner 2049, where they did Rachel fully CG, and I could not tell. It was gorgeous. I guess also Logan, the where they had two of him on a screen at once, but it wasn't de-aged. It was just two of them on the screen. But that is a visual, and that kind of blocks it. They didn't have Ian Holm's voice, so I don't know how they did the voice of him, if they just got a voice actor to pretend to be him. But if you were able to AI generate the voice and the face, essentially we're running into... what's the sci-fi short story? The Darfstellar, where you just have robots.
I'm shaking my head because I don't know this one.
Oh, it's a
And
beautiful.
Mr.
short
Walter's
story.
like gesturing to us because like you guys should know this one, right?
And I'm just like, let's talk about something I've heard of. How about that?
It's a story where robots have taken over the stage, and actors signed over their likeness and voice to be portrayed by the robots, so the actors just get paid and don't have to act anymore, and it's all robots. How does that change art? Commence conversation. That's
I got a follow-up question to this. I'm okay with Darth Vader's voice being used in perpetuity on future Star Wars projects. We've kind of talked about writing, and we're like not okay with that, or that feel like that would be kind of weird. What about, let's say, the lead singer of a band dies, but before he died or she died, they signed over the rights to their vocal imprint so that the band could keep producing more songs with that exact voice. Do you think that would work? How would you feel if Freddie Mercury was brought back to life in voice only
I think
for new Queen songs?
I guess. This is a product of the society we live in today. But I'm just thinking about this concept of consent, and if somebody is consenting to that use, I don't care if they try. I might be a little bit skeptical that the product is good. I don't. How much was that person involved in the songwriting process, and now you're trying to write songs for their voice without them there to do so? I feel like that would hurt the product, and so much of, I don't know, for me, part of it is like I want to see the live performance, and then you're going to throw a hologram version of that person up on stage who's pretending to perform, and all of that. I don't think I would want to watch, but I wouldn't care if other people did.
I think you run into the issue that, well, and I guess you'll run into this issue with Darth Vader's voice as well, where it is a vocal performance. and the AI just takes the average and gives a result, right? So there are vocal decisions that the singer would make in that song, which the AI will not make.
Yeah. And that probably, maybe it goes back to that uncanny valley part of or maybe even just the concept that people look at it and they don't feel the same emotional connection that they had to the other piece. And maybe they can't explain why, but it's not the same. It's not as powerful as it had been.
This might be a topic for another discussion, but this kind of feels like, and actually kind of circling back to this book, The Singularity is Near When We Merge with AI, this idea of immortality and our desire to overcome death or to erase its effects by human means alone, and how this kind of discussion is inching toward that. We're bringing people back from the dead. We're trying to get more performances out of actors. We're trying to get more writing out of dead writers. For what? Because we like them, and that's all motivated by nostalgia.
Nostalgia is a powerful drug, my friend.
It is. What's the member berries from South Park? You guys familiar with? Yeah.
Remember the Cold War? Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know. That's you know what I think though? I think it's time for what every single lesson usually happens is a random rant by a teacher. Today's random rant is brought to you by Mr. Walter.
Speaking of drugs, coffee is vile, okay? Coffee is terrible. I don't know why people drink it. It's bad. It's literal bean soup. And I understand that it can smell good, but it tastes like garbaggio. I don't want it anywhere near me. And we are just fostering caffeine addictions for this entire country, pretending it's not an issue. It's bad. We should get rid of it. Abolish coffee. No mas.
I believe that I would like to give that rant a C+.
I mean, I'm biased because I drink coffee, so yeah, I'm also going to go low C, C minus C range.
No, we're just biased.
All right, so I want to zoom out. We've been focusing on AI kind of in these narrow realms of education and art, which I think is really relevant. But what about for society at large? Should we be scared? Maybe it's just because we're a month away from a presidential election, but I'm thinking about the implications for democracy itself, where we're seeing where during the primary there was a robocall that was sent out to a state where they did a deep fake of Joe Biden's voice telling people not to vote in the primary. So people got a phone call, and it's Joe Biden's voice telling them not to vote.
How do you AI Joe Biden's voice?
They did it, and so like in the era of deepfakes, where if we're saying people can't distinguish between art and reality, my social media feed filled with people sharing AI-generated babies playing with puppies and talking about how cute the picture is, and I have to believe they think it's a real photo. Is there a threat to democracy?
Deep breaths all around the table.
I don't know how to begin this one because it kind of speaks to the general temperament of the country's populace and what they can discern is true or not. And we all, despite what we want to think about ourselves, we want to believe that we can tell the difference between AI art and real human-created art. But that study showed that we're not good at it. The same is going to be true for videos, where we take a person's likeness and throw them in a situation that puts them in a bad light, and that is going to trick people. there have been a lot of talks about safeguards, watermarks to try to curb this, but I don't think, I mean, it's only been mentioned. I don't think it's gone anywhere. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. I don't know how you can regulate this.
Yeah. And I think part of it is, too, that people are predisposed to believe things that they already want to believe. So if I'm a person who is anti-candidate A, and I see an AI-generated image of candidate A in a negative light, that makes me happy, and I'm going to share it instantly because I want other people to feel the same way about candidate A that I feel.
The level of truth in campaign ads is always, how should we say?
Dubious at best.
Dubious at best, maybe, when they throw out figures, numbers. And so the aspect of spinning the truth or some level of deception's always been a part of politics.
But I think there's been I think it's different because when Americans watch campaign ads, they know it's a campaign ad, and so they approach it with a certain level of skepticism, I believe. But if I'm seeing something in my social media feed that a friend is sharing and it claims to be a news story, am I having heightened awareness that I should be watching for falsehoods?
I think that's kind of where we're headed. We're just going to be, as skeptical as we are now, we're probably going to get even more skeptical. At least we probably should be more skeptical.
Yeah, I think your question assumes that our democracy isn't currently broken.
Well, look, okay, I'm a history teacher. I will tell you that democracy has always been broken,
right?
Just in different ways. It's been attacked by all different avenues, and this is one of the newest forms,
this
right?
This is just another one to pile on the top, and we're gonna pivot, like we always have, to a new form of things. I'm sure things were published in news articles of quotes that weren't real for candidates in the past, but now it's in video form.
In the early 1900s, it was the author of The Jungle.
He also wrote Oil. Upton Sinclair.
Upton Sinclair. This is a true story. So Upton Sinclair was running for governor of California, and his opponents, this was when video was like pretty new, took footage of like a mob of people coming down the road looking all disheveled and whatever. Then they ran it as a campaign ad saying that there are hordes of homeless poor people descending on the state of California because they hear Upton Sinclair is going to be the governor and enact socialist policies here. And so don't vote for him or these hordes of whatever are going to come in and invade our state.
These hobos.
and so this isn't new.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't think this is new. I don't think it's going to change much.
Yeah, I would kind of agree. It is going to be just a new tool in the toolbox for the campaign people. What's the technical term?
Manager?
Manager?
Campaign
Question mark?
Yeah. But yeah, hopefully we as teachers can do our part to educate and maybe.
Oh, that's such a
We have
fluffy
what I'm
way
taking
of
away
thinking
from
about
this. What I'm taking away from this is that we have the most important jobs in the world. Don't take my job, AI.
Please.
But you can grade for me, please.
So that I can spend that time designing more productive activities for my students to do to guard them against the dangers of AI.
Right. That's obviously what we're going to do with our time.
Or play board games.
One of the two.
One of those two. Or spend time with my family. How about that? Gentlemen, I guess it seems like our conversation, our lesson for the day is wanting to close. Do you have any closing thoughts that we would like to send our students out into the world with?
I was I'm going to say I was maybe one of the first whistleblowers when it would have been OpenAI. It was they were playing around with ChatGPT 2, which was like before it was released publicly as ChatGPT. They had the tool, or I forget what they called, but you could kind of play around with it, and it was doing an okay job. And then everyone will remember right around Christmas time of 2022 when ChatGPT went live. That's going to be, I'm going to throw out the term inflection point in society when that was.
Ooh, fancy.
I think that gets overused, but I think it will be a big moment in history before large language models were widely available and after. And when I first saw that, I was excited. I was optimistic because here's this tool that is like the calculator, but for writing. And that's going to help me as a teacher generate ideas, kind of be a co-intelligence. I can offload some of the capacity of my brain to this so that I can focus on more nuanced problems that, for right now, only I can solve. And I'm still, I am concerned a little bit more now, but I'm still optimistic with it as a tool. I probably play around with it less now than I did when it first came out, but I still do use it fairly often, if not daily, at least multiple times a week, either as a teacher or just as a parent and a husband for different ideas. Like I just generated ideas to play games for my 6 turning 7-year-old to play with 10 friends using minimal to no equipment. Like just throwing it a prompt like that and coming up with simple game ideas.
I feel like I was less optimistic than Derek,
Mr. Rabbers.
Mr. Rabbers. Well, he called me Ben earlier.
We've been using it interchangeably.
We're going to work on that.
Depends on how much. Well, it really depends on how respectful I'm feeling at the moment.
Just like my students. I was less optimistic than you. I still think there are great opportunities for it to be used, but part of it is we are adults using this, and we are using it to supplement what we already do. The generation coming up is going to be using it as a dependency, as a learned helplessness, as we teachers like to call it. So finding ways to solve that before it becomes an issue, I think, is a bigger problem than we might be focusing on right now. And if I'm right, that means in 5-6 years, when all of the people coming out of grade school who've been using ChatGPT for how many years now, when they get to high school, that's going to be a lot bigger issue than it is right now when it first erupted. But I hope I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong. And I guess from my perspective, where I'm sitting right now is I can see that this is an evolving reality, and I'm trying to ride the wave, right? So how can I maximize the benefits to myself and my students while mitigating the damage and making sure that I change as a teacher in a way that makes sure that I'm still generating value for my students and preparing them to thrive in a world where AI is the norm. And what that looks like,
maybe the real AI was the friends we made along the way. All right.
Now look, any good lesson any good lesson has to end with some homework. So Mr. Rabbers has prepared an assignment for all of you.
So play along with the research that we were mentioning before. Go through your social media feeds, and it's fall. If you have a significant other, they may be already brewing or looking to buy that pumpkin spice latte and getting out the cable knit sweaters and lighting up the wood in the fireplace. And they love their art or pictures of Vermont and the American Northeast during this time of year showing the fall foliage. Well, a lot of those pictures are making their rounds on social media is AI generated. So see what you can do. Do your part and see what you can figure out is AI and what is not. Maybe just stir the pot a little bit and say, where did you get this picture from? And maybe do a little digging to see if it's actual photograph picture drawn by a human or if it's generated by a computer.
All right, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure getting to learn with you three. You're two. There's only two of you. I'm the third one. Gentlemen, and I look forward to our next lesson on a topic to be determined.
We've got a list, so it's, yeah.
One of those.
You're dismissed.